In The Punisher, we find ourselves in a deli in the neighborhood of San Gennaro as several Yakuza are shaking down the place for protection money. Now, the owner tells him he already paid to Don Gracie, but the Yakuza tell him that this is their turf now and they start destroying his establishment. But Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, walks in a door, letting the men know that this is his turf now, as he's the new Don of the Gracie family. Now, the Yakuza don't give a fuck as they kick Frank Castle out the front window of the establishment. Now, the guy heading this group of Yakuza tell his men to go outside and kill Frank Castle once and for all. But as they make it outside, Frank Castle is waiting on them as he ups hand cannons and then proceeds to put several holes in the Yakuza. He then walks over to the dude in charge and pistol whips him like a little bitch and gives him a message. He basically tells the dude that he's Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, and he's running the Gracie family now. He goes on to say the only reason you're still alive is because I need a messenger, so tell your boss to stay out of my turf. Frank Castle would be picked up by Vinny, one of his four horsemen, and Vinny would inform him that he's the boss, so he need not dirty his hands with such trivial matters. But Frank says he's wrong as he needs to prove himself to everybody else. Besides, he's not even really sure if these guys will follow him. But elsewhere in another part of the neighborhood, at the temporary headquarters of the Dachidoku, the Yakuza man that Frank left alive is named Tetsuo, and he's forced to return to his headquarters and report his failure. Now, unfortunately for Tetsuo, in order to atone for dishonoring his Oyabun, he's forced to cut off his pinky finger. But the Yakuza know Frank has a Korean named Kim Sung-young working for him, so they attempt to set up a meeting. 36 hours later in New York City, in San Gennaro, Frank informs them that he wants to start moving their money out of protection areas and into more legitimate areas. But some of his men seem to disagree on how to organize the business moving forward, so they're at a crossroads. Now, elsewhere in another part of town, Kim Sung-young goes to meet with the Yakuza members who try to extend an olive branch. They tell Kim that pretty soon all the Gracies will be dead and he's better suited working for them. But Kim Sung-young is not interested as he pulls out a 1911 and a MAC 10 and puts several holes in the Yakuza and leaves nothing but bodies behind. Back at the Yakuza headquarters, they discover all their men are dead, so they're like, oh shit, well, so much for the Korean. But no matter, as now they have a metahuman in their employ named the Hatchet Man, and he's come to take down Frank Castle as well as the Gracies. Now back at the Gracie compound, two members of the family, Robert and Joey, talk as Joey, the younger member, thinks he should be running the crime family. But Robert laughs as he tells him he would work for his sister before he works for a squirt like him, and he ain't working for no skirt. Meanwhile, Leslie comes in to inform Frank and the older members that the Yakuza are downtown and they're shooting up the city, and they seem to have some sort of metahuman working with them. Now, seeing as Frank is the boss, he decides to mobilize, but he knows it could be a trap to lure him out from the base. Frank tells Leslie and Kim to come with him while he tells Mr. Halftree and Vinny to watch the house and protect home base. But elsewhere downtown, the Hatchet Man and several Yakuza goons are shooting up the city and vandalizing several establishments as they're simply trying to lure out the Gracies and the Punisher. Now, the Hatchet Man gets his wish as he gets confronted by the Punisher, Leslie Gracie, and Kim Sung-young, and they immediately up hand cannons. Now, several Yakuza take cover, but the Hatchet Man's body starts to glow as he tells Frank he's Hachiman and he's named that for a reason, and he starts to reflect the bullets back at Frank and Leslie, forcing them to take cover. Now, one of Frank's guys tries to provide some suppression fire, but it's not enough as Hachiman is on that ass and he completely slices the car in half that the guy was taking cover behind. Now, the Hatchet Man proceeds to focus in on Frank Castle, but Castle takes cover as they gather intel. They figure out that this guy's a metahuman who can harness his chi, and he's usually sent as an enforcer for the Yakuza, but this must be his first trip to the States. Frank Castle thinks in the old days he would have just blew him up with a stinger, but now there's too much collateral damage. But as Frank Castle observes the Hatchet Man, he notices it's getting very wet as it's raining, and the water seems to be piercing his chi. Frank tells Leslie to go get him a bow and arrow, and in the meantime, he hops from behind the car and ups cannons to provide a little bit of subterfuge. Now, one of Frank's guys decide this is too dangerous over here and he needs a buffer zone, so he pulls a lady out the car and tries to use her as a human shield. But Frank Castle beats this guy into the ground and lets him know if he ever tries to do that again, he'll kill him himself. Meanwhile, as Kim Sung Young tackles Hachiman, for a second he has Hachiman on the back foot, but Hachiman reverses the position, and now Kim Sung Young is on the floor facing down a big ass hatchet. But to the Hatchet Man's surprise, he's hit in the back by a bow and arrow, as apparently Frank Castle has figured out that high velocity projectiles cannot penetrate his chi, but low velocity projectiles can. Frank Castle basically tells him he could either die here or go back to his employers and recommend they all talk. Hachiman is now indebted to Frank Castle for sparing his life, but he plans to one day discharge that debt and kill Frank Castle. But elsewhere in another part of town, a man disguised as the Punisher goes to kill the man that flipped the switch in the electric chair that killed Frank Castle. Now, as the man lays on the floor dying, he tells him that he should have been the one to kill Frank Castle. To be continued.